Ladies and gentlemen, you're gonna meet a man who played bass for the Apocryphals in the 60s, played Joey Zasa in Godfather III, the voice of Fat Tony in The Simpsons. He's also David Rossi in Criminal Minds. I'm introducing to you Joe Mantegna. You're gonna go places and learn things about this man that nobody even knows. I'm telling you right now, I thought I was talking to one of my uncles from the old country of Italy. This was an incredible interview. Grab a cup of Joe and learn about Joe. I introduce to you Joseph Anthony Mantegna. What intrigued you about coming on this program?
You know, at 76 years old, everything intrigues me because I'm thinking, if not now, when? But it makes you realize that there are things you just want to be able to, you don't want to be able to say, well, don't leave anything on the bucket list in terms of exploration of whatever it may be, that's material, that isn't, that is spiritual, that isn't. Just, you know, I mean, so when given the opportunities, and I've been very blessed to have been in a profession that has allowed me to perhaps walk paths that a lot of people would kind of, you know, would pay to do. Like, in other words, oh yeah, I'd like to do that. I'd like to have the opportunity to do that. You know, why wouldn't I? You know what I mean? It's like, in other words, today's Tuesday, so I have a choice. Do I do this, or do I do, like, you know, catch something on, you know, on television? Yeah, no, it's just kind of a simplified answer, but I'm into, you never know what you're going to discover and what you're going to learn, and so why not take that opportunity?
And I think one of the beauties of this particular program is that we are interviewing people that talk about the more spiritual sides and their Catholic experiences as well. And so, have you ever been interviewed with a priest this long before? Or?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
you know, not that I can recall.
So now a little small bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. that one's out. Yeah, okay, right. You know, have my assistant Dan call. You know, find a rabbi. Let's see what he's got to say.
So the reason why we call it the Hound of Heaven show is Spielberg had come up with the Shoah Foundation project back in the 90s, and he interviewed all these Jewish Holocaust survivors. Right. And I thought that was such an intriguing project, which I had learned about. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could have Catholic notables and celebrities and people of accomplishments talk about their faith? And so this was why we came up with the Hound of Heaven, because Francis Thompson wrote this poem in 1893, and he influenced writers like Oscar Wilde, Tolkien, and C.S. Lewis. And because this guy was the influencer of those influencers, we thought that's a really good hound, you know, God being the hound who comes to us and pursues us. And so that's why we use that imagery of the Hound of Heaven. God always pursues us and loves us. And that's why we use that as our image for this particular show. So
yeah,
I understand.
I like that analogy.
I don't know the context, but I remember you had talked about a quote. I think it's one of your actors on Criminal Minds. It talks about the scars remind us.
Yeah, well, the quote, as I believe, is scars remind us where we've been. They need not dictate where we're going.
Yeah.
And I found that as being pretty prolific. And in fact, we found a way to incorporate it in such a way that we were able to explain it in an episode where it came from. Someone had sent it to me when I was a young man, when I was in the Vietnam War, and then we applied it then again later. And I've actually used that quote in life. I could specifically think of one occasion where it was like the most apropos kind of thing I could think of to say that I thought was fitting.
Is there any like scars that you say, you know what, because of these experiences, it's really formed me to who I am today?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have them. I mean, one of the things, I would think many people have certain tenets they live by, or mottos, or certain sayings that resonate in their head. The one that I use often is, everyone's got a story and nobody gets a free ride. And I think of that. And I often think of that. I remember as a young man, as a young actor, I was studying to be an actor back, you know, and as a teenager. And I was reading autobiographies. And one autobiography that caught my eye, since he was starring in my favorite movie, which was Robin Hood, was Errol Flynn. So I remember I was about probably 16 years old, and I got the book My Wicked, Wicked Ways, which was Errol Flynn's autobiography. And I'm reading about this guy, and it's like, oh my God, well, what a life. And he would have a boat, and he was had all the, all these different, all the women in the world. And he was just, this very almost hedonistic lifestyle. But yet it was for a 16-year-old boy to read this. This was very exciting. And I'm thinking, wow, this is how exciting. And then I came to a little chapter where somewhere about 2/3 into the book, and he says, so here I am. I'm in my home, my beautiful home. I have all these beautiful women. This, that. He's listing all the wonderful things happening. He's like, so he says, why am I sitting here with the barrel of a pistol in my mouth?
Wow.
And then for whatever happens, he makes that decision. Maybe somebody calls his name or something. He just hesitates and doesn't do it. And I remember having such an impact on me at the time, thinking, whoa, Errol, why? What's that all about? And so between the ages of 16 to where I am today, I think I can now understand it. I can relate, and I understand it. And it goes back to that saying, you know, uh, everybody's got a story. Nobody gets a free ride. Errol didn't have a free ride. I haven't had a free ride. You haven't had a free ride. Nobody in this room has had a free ride. We all have our stories. So you have to be a little careful before you say to yourself, gee, I wish I was that guy. I'd trade places in a minute for that guy. Maybe not. Maybe you dig deep enough and you find out, you know what, I'll play the cards I've been dealt.
There's an expression I've heard, that God doesn't give us a cross we can't handle. And I find that somebody who has like a special needs person, like I don't know if I can handle that cross. But some people like they it just flows with their personality.
Well, that cross was given upon us. I mean, my wife, we have a special needs daughter. My oldest daughter, she's 36 years old now. She has autism. So, I mean, I don't know. It's funny when people will say to me, what's it like to have a daughter with autism? And I say, I don't know what it's like not to have a daughter with
Right.
autism. So, I mean, it is part of the makeup and the matrix of my life and our life and my family's life. And it's okay. And again, that it goes into kind of what you're saying. You're only given what you can handle. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think we all probably have the capability in some ways to kind of make do with what position we are in.
Right.
But sometimes it's a little easier for some than for others. All you have to do is look at the world. Look at the world today. Situations going around the world. There's a lot of people that are in pretty tough shape.
Right.
A lot of horrible things are happening. So I don't think anybody can be so cavalier as to say, oh yeah, well, everybody should be able to handle their situation. And I don't know what the explanation is for that. That's where things like faith come in,
Right.
and belief and hope. And I guess that's where the core of my faith lies, in the sense that when I walk outside and I look at the sky and it's blue and there's beautiful white clouds and I see a bird fly and I think to myself, why do I think that's beautiful? Why do I even think that's nice? What's created that emotion in me to say to myself, this is a beautiful day and I feel really good. You know what I mean? There's almost has to be some logic behind that. And that's where faith comes in, I think.
It's not random.
It's not random. Or if it's random, it's kind of a nutty kind of random. There seems to be nothing else is really random.
Because I find that when we have these life experiences, where whatever it might be, parents dying young, they're young and we're young, parents die when they're really old, like you and I have the same. Like my dad died when I was 11. Yours was in your 20s. Your mom dies. She's 101. I mean, these are okay, Lord. That's about as opposite you can get, young and old. I mean,
Right.
so why me? Why this? And sometimes it's just like I don't have an answer to that. I used to tell people like, look, I'm not gonna get the answer until I get to heaven.
That's right.
God's gonna. Hey, you know what? This is why this happened.
That's right.
Oh, okay. So because if you start thinking about the past so much, then it gets to the point where you could go crazy. You're gonna lose more hair than I have. This kind of goes into our next question because we talked about crosses and there's a phrase that you use somewhere where it says, I forgot where the context is, but you may explain it. It says, why is this happening to me? And then God says, why not? And so if you can expound upon that a little bit too, is how that has helped you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I think, seeing that one. I think it was almost like in a greeting card. There was that joke, there's this guy's pleading to heaven, "Oh God, why me?" And you hear the voice, "Why not?" And it's one of those things where you laugh at it and there's the humor of it, but then on the other hand, you go, "Hmm." It's like there was another card that I remember resonated with me in a way. I was in high school, I think, and a friend of mine had this card, and on the front of it, and it showed this. It was a figure of a cartoon kind of a figure, and he's looking up at at the stars and the universe and everything, and saying, you know, when you look at all that and you see the magnitude of the universe and the planets and the stars and all of that, you know, doesn't it make you just realize how insignificant, we are? Then you open it up, it says, me neither, and that's human nature. That's it. So in other words, you almost have that choice. So what side of the street are you going to live on? You live on this side of the street where you say to yourself, why is this happening to me? And on the other side of the street, which is, well, well, why not? But now what are you going to do about it? It kind of ties into that whole thing. I don't care if you fall down. It's how are you going to be able to get up?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think in a way, that's what life is about. And obviously, for some people, they fall a lot further, and it's a lot harder to get up.
Right.
And then for others, as to why that is and what's the logic of that, again, maybe we'll find out in another day, in another time, and in another place.
I never figured out why you, why me, why this happens to you, why this story is for you. I mean, when you look at it from the perspective of God has, I mean, a specific plan for each specific person to do a specific thing, and you look at the billions of people that have been created. I go, how does God keep that in his head? I can barely figure out what to order for lunch. And so that's what blows my mind of the divine intellect is like, wow, he has everybody in his mind at the same time and has a specific reason for Joe, for Father Darrin, everybody. This is your path to holiness or being a good person or influencing the world. And this is how I want you to live your life. So I remember hearing that the expression like God doesn't have nobody's special in God because he loves everybody unconditionally. So if we're unconditionally loved, he just has specific roles for each of us to play. Like you're an actor, you play various roles, but each of these roles actually influence other people. And you think about how many people have influenced your life. If you're going to say that those really positive role models in your life that just really shape Joe
Yeah,
Mantegna.
there's been numerous, you know what I mean? And I think they happen every day, you know what I mean? Which is always a good thing. Very often, sometimes I'll meet somebody and I'll realize, I'll say, well, this is great because you don't often meet a new old friend. When you meet somebody where you realize you've met them maybe sometime later in life, but you realize this is somebody that I kind of feel like I've known a long time, and that now I know I'm going to continue to know for the rest of this time. And that's kind of a blessing. Uh, but beyond that, I think I've been very blessed and lucky that way in the sense that my family life was pretty stable. I look back on it. My father he was in ill health all this. I shouldn't be here, first of all. My father was of a fairly large family. My grandparents, my father's side, they came from Sicily and went to this small town called Krebs, Oklahoma, of all
I
places.
know.
And because of the nature of my job, I've had the opportunity to kind of explore this, and in fact, even incorporate it into my work. So what I discovered was that, and I've been to the town in Sicily, Calasciabetta, Sicily, and it's at the very tip top of a mountain at the center of this island of Sicily. Now here's this beautiful island, and I finally get to this town with my wife, and I go there right after we were married. And I'm at the tip top of this mountain. I realize it's all rock. You go to the cemetery and everybody's buried above ground because you can't really dig into it. And I'm thinking the only thing you can grow on this mountain is old. So I could kind of understand why people left. So back then, at the turn of the century, my grandfather, along with a good friend of his, they must have heard somewhere that if you go to this place called Krebs, Oklahoma, the Native Americans were selling land there. And that what you would do is work in the coal mines. They had coal mines there. And if you could work in the coal mines long enough, you can make enough money to pay the Native Americans enough to buy a farm. And this is what he did. And he went with his dear friend, whose last name was Randazzo. The two of them go to this Krebs, Oklahoma. He works in a coal mine for 5 years. And this was typical of Italian family. I mean, because there's Rockland, Colorado was another place, because I did a movie called Wait Until Spring Bandini, which is about that family that worked in coal mines there. So a lot of Italian immigrants, not just Italian immigrants, but Italian immigrants did that. So for 5 years, my grandfather saved $100 a year. We have the proof of all this because we have the paperwork. For 5 years, he worked in the coal mines. buys this 50-acre farm, and this farm has been in our family up until about 4 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
4 weeks ago. Because what had happened is my grandfather was there with all the kids, my dad included, My grandfather, who I never got to know because he had a appendicitis attack on the farm while my dad was a small child, and all the kids were young. So my grandmother, of course, they own this farm, but she can't run it with all these little kids. She has family in Chicago. She packs up everybody. They go to Chicago. And that's why all of my memories, all of my background, all of my is urban Chicago. But yet my dad always talked about that farm, the farm where he grew up. He was a farm boy from Oklahoma. He liked that music. He liked all that. But I couldn't relate. I was
Yeah.
a city boy, you know. And the other thing was my father contracted tuberculosis before I was born. So all during World War II, he was in a sanitarium. They took out one of his lungs. They took out half of the other lung. And basically, we found out later, when he finally did pass away in his mid-50s, that they had in the medical records when they released him from the hospital, they said, well, we'll give this guy 5, 6 years, but that's tops. That's it for him.
Right.
Luckily, he lived beyond that, and otherwise I wouldn't have been born.
Wow.
So and he smoked, he drank, he did all the things that you shouldn't do when you only have half a lung. And so because of that, I mean, even within all that. So here's that side of my family, the Sicilian side. That's kind of a background. My mother's side was Barese, so I know
Yeah.
you part of that as well. They all thought they were Dean Martin and St. Frank Sinatra. They were all my relatives were all like this. It was a whole different thing. I used to make jokes that my parents were a mixed marriage, even they were both Italians, but they were so different in terms of the cultures that it was almost like that. But when I look back on it, it's a long answer to your question. It was a great way to kind of grow up because I grew up in a community in the west side of Chicago where all the families had, again, everybody's got a story. So everybody's stories were different, but yet we all made do of what it was. There were things of focus. You know, of course, the church is a focus. I mean, I didn't go to Catholic school very long because my parents couldn't afford it. Because my father was partly disabled, my mother, what she did for a living was wrap packages for Sears Roebuck. For 25 years, she worked in a mail order because that's where her headquarters was. And she wrapped packages that went out. You know, that's why when I was a boy, I became a Cub Scout. I won the award for tying the best knots because my mother taught me how to do that because she knew how to wrap packages. But that childhood of growing up like that in that kind of environment, and like I said, I couldn't go to Catholic church because we couldn't afford Catholic school. But I was able to do a couple of years at Mother Cabrini back at the time. But otherwise, I always had a public education. But I'm not crying like poor or like, oh, woe is me. That was the norm. We were, we never, we always had enough to eat, this, that, and the other. So I, you make your role models where you find them. And all I can say is it seemed all very positive. You could see it, you could see negative things happening around you in your life. You see it in life, you see it in films, you see it in television, you see it whatever, you hear about it. But at the end of the day, you try to latch on to whatever the positive influences you've had in your life, and then you make that choice. Which path am I going to take? Am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And I think I got to say I'm lucky enough that I had enough positive influence that it would have been like almost a blasphemy to say, no, I'm going this route because this is the easy way, and this is, and I don't care who it hurts or I don't care who suffers before it.
Any priest or nun, when you're growing up, like, these guys are classy, these are really
There
funny.
were all guys. Well, there were always the different. There was there was one specific nun I remember in 7th grade, Sister Phillip, who was. I remember. These were classic nuns. You got to remember, this is the 50s.
Yeah.
So the nuns, they all look like penguins. I mean, they had the black and the stuff like this. So I might as well have been going to school in Europe. So all you saw was that face like that.
Yeah, with the wimple.
Yeah. So I remember one day we were playing out in the schoolyard. So you got to remember, I'm in 7th grade. So however old that is, 11, I don't know. And we're playing softball. I remember Sister Phillip coming out, and she's watching us, and she decides, can I bat? And she pulled that thing down. And I remember she had this red hair, and she had this youthful face. She looked like a young Katharine Hepburn. And she got up there with the bat, hit the ball, and ran. And I was like in shock because I was of the mind at that age, and you're at Catholic school, like, They have hair, they have bodies, they have a face, they are people. They're not, you know what I mean? And realize this is okay. It's a costume, but underneath it is this thing as a person. Sometimes you forget that when you're a kid, because all you know is that's a nun, and then you have to, that's a, and that was a revelation, and it was a good revelation. And there was another thing about her, and specifically I can remember, they would send things to the school as they often do. These companies would send like maybe projects. They say, hey, if you've got a kid that you think might be interested in art or science, pass this on to them. And I remember her singling me out. And I'll never forget this. And I can't remember what it was. But she says, Joe, I think this is something you'd appreciate. You seem to have an interest in whatever it maybe it was at the time. Maybe it was astronomy. And she says, if this came in from some company, and I think you're the student that would. And I just was so flattered by that. And, because it was almost like, wow, she actually thinks I have maybe a propensity to do something with this.
Wow.
And so it humanized her, and helped humanize the church for me. Because there certainly was enough tradition going on, and all the stuff you got to do, and you go to the mass, and there's
Latin and kneel
and singing it. There's all this stuff in Latin and this that. This is the 50s, like I said, and there was a lot of process and a lot of order and this, that, and the other. But whenever those moments of the humanization of it came into play, was really a good thing, and I never lost sight of that. You know what I mean?
Were your godparents like involved in your life?
Probably, yeah. Well, my godfather was my cousin Jackie. It was like my mother's sister's son, and of course he gave me the watch, that I got, for the confirmation.
Right.
It was those things. But like, well, my first communion, I remember very specifically, because when I was 8 years old, I contracted rheumatic fever.
Oh,
And so at the time, I don't know what rheumatic fever was. I had a strep throat. Next thing I know, they sent me to a hospital because the strep throat, I guess, was pretty bad. And then they diagnosed it as rheumatic fever. Next thing I know, I'm in a children's hospital in Chicago, which still exists today. But at the time, it was strictly for rheumatic fever patients. It was called La Rabida Children's Hospital for rheumatic fever. Now, I was in that hospital for 5 months.
wow.
Because back then, that's what you did for rheumatic fever.
It's a long time for an 8-year-old.
Long time for an 8-year-old, and it's all kids. And I'm in there so I missed that whole, semester of school. Uh, and you're 8 years old, so you don't know the seriousness of this, that, and the other. But I specifically remember how there was another kid in the bed next to me, and he used to wanted to wear his cowboy boots. They let him wear them. And then I remember a few days later, he wasn't there. I remember saying to one of the nurses, "Where's happened to Jimmy?" or whatever. "Oh, well, Jimmy had to leave." Now I find out later, that Jimmy passed away.
Ah,
Kids would die there. I mean, there was, if if the heart problems that some were associated with rheumatic fever were bad enough, it could be fatal. But when you're 8 years old, they're not, not telling you this, that, and it's fine. But I got through it. But of those 5 months, the first 3 months was bed rest. You don't get out of the bed except to go to the bathroom. But when you're 8 years old, you just do what you're told, and then. But I can't even imagine, what my parents must have gone through, and my family and
wow.
this, that. But they did what they did, and I But it goes back to, they decided, well, he's 8 years old, he hasn't had a communion yet. Maybe we should do that. It was like, yeah, okay, whatever, I'm game. And so I remember specifically that they had a priest come to the hospital, and the nurses acted as his whatever assistants they did. And I remember he came close to the bed, and they put a sheet around us so he can do communion, or can do confession.
Oh, so your first confession was in the
My first
hospital,
confession was in the hospital, yeah, at 8 years old.
and they had a screen. They had this sheet there, so it
They
was.
put a sheet just to give us a little privacy, I guess. I mean, it wasn't like, they didn't make a big deal out of it, but as I recall, they did something like that. And you don't have that much to confess when you're 8 years old anyway. I think I got off pretty easy. Maybe 2 Hail Marys, I don't know.
It was giving you a special.
Yeah. And then I remember that a couple of nurses who must have been Catholic were taking this pretty seriously. So I'm thinking, well, I better take it pretty seriously too, because at this point I wasn't in Catholic school. This was prior to that. I was still a public school student. And my grandmother was very religious, you know.
Hmm.
She was the one that was, had saying the novenas and the stuff, and the rosaries and the statues and all kinds of stuff like that. But I remember sitting in that bed and thinking, I guess this is a pretty important deal, because he came and he did the thing and he explained to me. the wafer on the tongue and the whole thing. And I thought, okay, wow. And it's only in retrospect now. I mean, I don't think I've even told the story in the last 50 years. But to think about it, I'm thinking, yeah, that's how I spent my first communion, uh, which is a little unique, you know. So I didn't get to see the little girls in the white dresses and me in the little suit, you know. No, I'm in pajamas.
That is probably the most unique first communion experience I've ever heard.
Well, that
And
was it.
I want to explore your relationship with your wife because I find it very fascinating that you guys have been married. You're a Hollywood guy, you've been in hundreds of movies, and you were married over 50 years? How
We've
did that
been together over 50 years. We have. We've been married, I think this year is 48.
40?
And we've been together like 50. Well, I quickly do the math from 1969 to today. What is that? That's
It's
50 something,
54 years, is that right?
54. So, okay.
Yeah.
So, right. That's right. Because we were together as a couple for about 5, 6 years. You can't remember, this was the 60s. Nobody got married in the 60s right away. You know, it was the 60s. But, but, uh, so we'd known each other, and actually I was in junior college, she was in high school, and we were both in the same theater department. And we wound up doing plays together. And so we knew who each other were, but that was it. And then we went our separate ways. And it was in 1969 when I auditioned for the play Hair, my first trying out for my first professional job as an actor. She happened to be auditioning for that same production. There were thousands and thousands of young people auditioning for that back in Chicago in '69. As it turned out, at that final callback, like we had to do 5, 6 callbacks. That final callback, they went from thousands of people, they whittled it down to about 30 people
Wow.
to pick the cast from. When I showed up for that callback, there she was. There's this girl that I'd done plays with in high school and junior college. I said, "Oh, hi, Arlene, how you doing? Oh, Joe, how you doing?" That was 1969. We've been together ever since. So we started our relationship then. We got married in '75 in Europe on top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. But we did it. We looked at all the what the how to do it, the red tape, the this, that, and the other, and we said, you know what? It's not gonna fly. It's 1975, but we were children of the '60s or teenagers. We'll do it our way. So we went up to the very top of the Eiffel Tower. There was a Chinese guy up there, a Chinese tourist. They said, "Come here. You're the witness." I says, "We're gonna marry ourselves here, and this is gonna be the day that we're gonna celebrate, is the day we got married." And we did that. It was October 3rd, 1975. No, to satisfy her parents, when we got back to Chicago, we kinda did it the other way and got the license and this, that, and the other. I don't even know what that day was. It was some day in December. But, yes, we've been together ever since, but we didn't have children right away. It was something like we were together for till 1987.
Wow.
Before we had our first child. And because we came to the realization, here we've been together something like, what was it, 12 years or more than that. And we're saying, you know what? Do we want to have children? I mean, it was something we'd lived our life. We'd done this, that, the other, and all that. We said, do we want to have children? And we said, I don't know. Do you? I don't know. We said, you know what I think we should do? I think this is the thing. If it was meant to be, if it's a God that intends us to have children, then so be it. So what we should do is not do anything to prevent us having a child, and let's see what happens. And if we do, we do, and if we don't, we don't. We'll accept that. And of course, she got pregnant in like 30 seconds, and that was our first child. As it turned out, that was a child. It's my daughter Mia. Who we were thinking, okay, wow, God, what a blessing. We've got this child, you know, we're going to have this child, we're going to have this baby. We didn't look into what the sex was going to be because I didn't believe in that. My feeling was, no, if we were supposed to know what the gender of a child is supposed to be, then there should be a window down here and we'd be able to see it. So now let's not do that. Let's not test fate. But as it turned out, she was due to be born in late August of that year. As it turned out, she chose to be born on the 5th of June of that year. She was 3 months premature.
Wow.
She was one of the smallest babies born in the state of California that year, I remember. And it was one of those things that happened. It was kind of like, it was just a typical Friday. My wife was a little nervous because there wasn't a lot of movement. She was just nervous. She said, something's wrong, something's wrong. She goes, I'm going to go to the hospital just because I just feel in my soul something's wrong. So I said, go ahead. I kind of stayed because we had an electrician coming over and I had to do something. I get a phone call saying, you better come to the hospital. We have to deliver this child right now. So I go to the hospital. And I was supposed to be throwing a bachelor party for my dear friend that at night. I called the guys. I said, I got to go. There's something going on. I get to the hospital. I said, look, your wife's lost all the amniotic fluid. Da, 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 da. Something's wrong in there. We have to deliver this baby now. My daughter was born at 1 pound, 13 ounces.
Wow.
She was as big as a squirrel, you know. And of course, it comes out under it's under very dire circumstances. And it was like, welcome to parenthood. And and I'll say this because I think it pertains to what we're doing now, and because what you do for a living, and what I'm telling you the story. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm the most religious person in the world because I'm not, and I haven't been, and you know what I mean. But I'm rooted in this faith that I was brought up in, and that's Catholicism is all I know. You know, I'm not going to discount anybody else, but that's all I know. So I remember these two nurses. My wife she's out of it. She's been under sedated, because they had to take the baby through an operating basically, even though she was not ready to deliver. So they can't just take it. Otherwise, these two nurses accompany me and I'm wondering why are they taking me arm in arm? And they take me to an incubator. And then in the incubator, I see this child that's like this big, and there's tubes and stuff and all kinds of things going on. And I start to, I can feel, and I feel myself starting. And of course, they're there. That's why they were there. They knew I was going to lose it.
Right.
And they had a little piece of paper on it. It says, baby girl Mantegna, because that's all they knew. There was no name. This is this new child that was just born. And it's just like, they don't even know if it's going to live. And he says, well, you come back tomorrow. We're gonna have to actually move her to another hospital that has better equipped. But your wife will be sedated. She'll be better in the morning. So why don't you just go home? There was a thunderstorm going on. This is here in Burbank.
Yeah.
This is like not far from here. This is St. Joe's Hospital,
Right.
right blocks away. Before I leave the room, I said, where's the chapel? And I remember walking into the chapel. And I went up to whatever that statue was that they have at St. Joseph. I guess it's probably was St. Joseph. Right? Makes sense. And I remember kneeling and saying, look, I know I'm not been a great Catholic. I'm not high on the list of the guys that are, next in line to be granted any favors. But help me out on this one. If you could just help me out on this one, uh, I'll try to be a better person as a result of it. And so I went home and it was a thunderstorm and I get back to the house and the electricity was out. I remember even driving thinking, God, anything else? Is anything else on the list today that's going to happen? Is this it? Is the electricity out the storm? My daughter being born? Is it going to we're going to go a different direction from here? I didn't get an answer, but the sun did come up. The storm ended. And I remember going back to the hospital the next day. Finally, my wife is awake and I sit with the doctor and he basically says, look, your daughter she's very small. She's 800 grams, whatever it was. And she said, but you know what? She seems very healthy. She doesn't have a lot of the problems a preemie of that size can have. We think, well, let's just see. Let's take it a day at a time. And of course, so every day we'd come and visit. They moved her to another hospital. And I remember, and then they would call us and say, well, we have to do this one little operation because she needs that. Okay, do what you have to do, the trust and all that. And that was the beginning of that journey. So here, all of a sudden, from the joy of like, oh, we're gonna have our first child to like, now we're on this path. And it was a path that we're still on it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this little baby has turned into this 36-year-old woman now, who is pure of heart. She has autism. That's probably the result of that prematurity or whatever. But she doesn't have a vindictive bone in her body. She is, there's a book you may be familiar with because it was written by a former Catholic priest called The Clowns of God. And in it, they talk about, in a nutshell, how the world's going to end. and the person's explaining to the other person who's like this the main character in the book who's a priest, and it shows this person who's kind of a representative of God explains to the person that says, yes, the end of the world's going to happen because God is disappointed in what's happening, and he's going to start over. But then he takes this person into this cavern, and in this cavern are all these children, and they're all children of like with autism, this, that, triple, this, that, all the disabled, people with Down syndrome, this, that. He says, well, who are these people? He says, well, these are the people that we're holding on to. We're going to get rid of everybody else, but we're holding on to them. He goes, why? He goes, because these are the people that bring a smile on God's face because they do nothing to offend him, nothing to offend anybody else. He says, these are the clowns of God. And that's the nature of the book. Morris West is the name of the writer. And that book had a strong impact on me. And I think of my daughter. She's one of those clowns of God. She doesn't understand things like jealousy or vindictiveness or this. She's 36 years old, but her idea of a good time would still be, let's go to Disneyland and see the princesses.
Right.
And so I know I may never have grandchildren, but I know I'll always have this person who is going to has that childlike innocence. So that's somewhat of a blessing. That tempers, in a way, who I am, hopefully, in the sense that tap into that to be able to say, don't be so, sure of yourself, Joe, because there's this other thing that's going on here.
I'm gonna let this sit for a second. That's
Yeah, I mean, this is
that was a beautiful.
oh yeah,
That's the smallest baby I ever baptized was 1 pound 12 ounces.
well, there you go. That's
Premature.
one ounce less.
Now my buddy, he took his wedding ring, was able to put it over his son's arm.
Yeah,
I Joseph Anthony, by the way.
that's my
Yeah,
name,
exactly.
Joseph Anthony.
And so,
I've seen that. I saw a father who did. Then I also saw a thing. This was interesting. There was one child that was in the incubator next to hers, and it was and they looked very similar. Very like very 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 pale, and it would come visit, and then we noticed the one child was getting darker. And then the parents showed up, and the parents were African American. And then the doctors explained to us. They said, with babies when they're that small, even the pigment hasn't even done what it does.
interesting.
So that all the babies are actually all born the same color when they're that little. When they're in that, they're not all born that color. That the pigmentation comes in later, which to me is further proof that we are all one. There is no, race makes no difference because that's just something that happens, just like your eye color. Just sometimes the blue goes brown, and so there was that too. And yet also there was instances where I would come to visit Mia, and there would be the other parents there with the other baby in the other incubator. Then you'd come one day, and then that incubator's not there, and then you look at the doctor and the nurses, and they say, yeah, that baby didn't make it, which was kind of typical. And yet our daughter fought through all these different things, and she's tough, she's strong.
You and your daughter, you're 2 for 2. That's what virtues did you, or what would you say you've learned that you didn't have before, but are kind of like brought into that changed you to become a better person because of Mia?
I don't know. I mean, somebody else would have to evaluate that because I don't know if I've become or not a better person. I'd like to. I certainly feel that have acquired more sensitivity
Mm.
of understanding that many people have to, carry a burden that not others have to. I mean, I tend to, it's caused me to be more involved with, I have a foundation, I have a family foundation where we use that aspect of my life to,
Mhm.
we get monetary donations. I can help, spread it around.
Right.
Because they have that capability to do that. So why wouldn't, why wouldn't I? So, I don't know why, why things happen to people the way they happen to, but all I know is, look, this thing has happened. That's our story, but I'm able to handle it.
Right.
We're able to handle it, and it's okay. And then I think there are others that have the same, very similar story, if not maybe more dramatic and more negative aspects to it. And it's not so easy for them to handle it. As to why that is, I don't know.
You're on Joan of Arcadia. Without a doubt, my favorite faith-based TV series I've ever seen in my life.
I agree.
Why did that resonate with you?
Again, it was an interesting situation. I had done a series for CBS at the time that was very successful. It was called The Last Don.
Yeah.
It was where I played one of the many gangsters I played in my career. And they came to me and they said, "We're going to give you a development deal, meaning you find something, and if you do it, we'll make it." It was like, there's one of those things actors hope to get.
Yeah.
Like, wow, it's like the old studio days. I'm like, wow, okay, a development deal. So they send me tons of scripts, this, that, and I originally decided I have a writer friend who was a writer from Chicago. I thought, oh, we'll get him to write a new thing and as it turned out, he was under contract to HBO. Because he was under contract to HBO, he couldn't write something for CBS.
Right.
And it was like, oh, it's that whole idea of this show that was going to be built around me and about this character we talked about. So I said, just send me stuff you have. So CBS sends me all these different scripts. And I read this one script, Joan of Arcadia. And for whatever reason, I read that script. Maybe part of it had to do with the fact that, again, with my daughter and this and that and just our life and everything. I can't, rationalize why it resonated with me. But I read this script and I thought to myself, and especially when I got to the line where the kid on the bus says, "Joan, I'm God." And then from that point on, I read this. I thought, at the end of the script, there were moments I laughed. There was moments I was touched. I moved. Tears came into my eyes, and I thought to myself, okay, this is interesting. They've given me a development deal, and here I'm about to go in there and say, I want to do this show about this girl. She's going to be the star. I can't be Joan. I can't be a 16-year-old girl. But I said, this show has to get done. And since I have the capability to be able to greenlight it, I'm going to do it because it just seems right. And not that it's noble to do it or anything, but I wanted to do it because I felt it was quality. I felt it's about something.
Right.
It was more than entertainment. And so I went in and they agreed fine. And so I was involved with all of the casting. I mean, them from Harry Steenburgen to ironically, the movie West Side Story that was basically me wanting to be an actor. And here her father played Riff in the movie West Side Story. So bottom line is we were able to put that together, shoot those episodes, especially that first season. I was just so taken by it. I thought, I love this show. I love what it's about. And I love that I'm hoping that people are going to react to it as and take from it the you don't want to say things have necessarily have a message. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. My feeling is I don't try to be a apostle, whatever the word may be, of trying to teach somebody something. You just put it out there and you hope they're going to take from it what they're going to take from it. But I just felt everything about it was positive and worthwhile, and so we did it. Of course, it's the nature of television. We did it one season. We won the People's Choice Award. The people seemed to love it. We did another season. And of course, at the end of the day, it's a business.
Yeah.
And so they figured out, well, this business is going to do better than that business. So we'll see you later. I would have loved it if it continued, even though, uh, it was, like I say, I wasn't the central character, but that was okay. And I'll be forever grateful that it got done. And so that's what was important.
It becomes kind of noble, and it becomes noble in a certain sense because you were willing to, I think it's Barbara Hill or Barbara Hall?
Deborah Hall
Barbara Hall.
created it.
Amazing creative mind she is. I've seen a lot of her shows are just very thought provoking. I believe she's Catholic as well, or at least Christian faith based. And the way she wrote God's dialogue in that show, I was like, this is the first time I can honestly say that a dialogue of God or something that represents God is not cheesy. and never sounded cheesy.
No.
I was so surprised by that.
No.
It was so cleverly written,
No,
and
and I was just disappointed only because we were about to go into a whole other areas because we were just when we ended that second season, they started introducing another character. They were saying, well, if you're going to believe in this, then you also got to believe there's going to be a flip side.
right.
And they would introduce the character that was going to kind of be that person was going to be like, if you got the archangel here, then you're going to that guy who's working the other side of the street over
That's
here.
right.
Now who's going to which there's going to be some conflict.
Right.
So we never were able to explore that, but that's okay. Like I said, I still to this day, I really appreciate when somebody will come up to me and say, I just want to tell you, thank you for Joan of Arcadia.
Yeah.
And I say, you're welcome because I feel just like you do about it.
Now, something interesting happened, I think, believe during that time. I think John Ritter passed. Jason, his son, was there, and you tell us that story. How you felt like you were able to help Jason in that time.
Well, yeah, we were filming Joan of Arcadia. Jason Ritter played one of my sons, who was John's son. And and it was one of the shooting days when all of a sudden Jason got a call on the set saying, you better come down there again. I think it was to St. Joseph's Hospital again, same place where
Wow.
my daughter was born, because John was working at Disney Studios, I think, in the neighborhood. And he runs over there. And as it turned out, and I mean, it's common knowledge, you go online and get the information on it. But what happened is it turned out that John Ritter had this kind of a unknown defect in his heart or something like that. And was unfortunately, nobody, you wouldn't in a preliminary examination, you just wouldn't know that existed. But
Mhm.
whatever, it manifested itself to where he passes away. So here's Jason at 20, I think he was 22, 23 years old at the time, and his father like that is gone.
Wow.
And so of course we stopped production for a while, and then we realized, okay, we'll start again tomorrow. We'll write Jason out for a few days until things calm down. So then he comes back to the set, and of course I kind of felt what he was going through because my father passed away. I was at the same age, and the same thing. I was doing the play Hair. I was on the road. And my brother calls me and happens to say, I think Dad's not going to make it. Better come home. It was like, and like as I said, my dad had been in ill health all his life, so it wasn't like a total surprise, but yet it wasn't imminent. I didn't know his death wasn't imminent, but it did come pretty quickly. So I didn't get home in time. I didn't get the chance to see him, but that's like I say, that's that. But I remember saying to Jason, I said, why don't you come to my trailer? We'll just talk about things, And I mean, he came to my trailer and we talked. And I told him, I said, I just want to let you know, I was there. I was that same age you are now when my father passed. And then he explained to me, which was kind of a beautiful thing. He said, I got to tell you, Joe. He said, my father and I were estranged. He said, when my parents got divorced, my dad went one way and I was kind of aligned with my mother. And because of it, I kind of resented where he was at. We didn't talk for quite a while, like a couple of years. It was just, and he said, it was his girlfriend at the time, Jason's girlfriend, said to him, Jason, you can't do this. You've got to go talk with your father, because she had been through a thing where she had, missed an opportunity of being someone close to her passed away, and she had resolved it. She said, you must do this for me. So he agrees to do it, and of course it happens, and he says, and finally they came to some conclusion. It's okay, you know what? We can't. And he says, and so he said, for that past year, him and his father made amends and were close. And he says, so he says, I think now, had I not done that, how horrific this would be, how terrible this would be. I said, I get it. I said, no, my dad and I, we had, when I last saw him, I went on the road to do this play. I saw him in November. He died in, I think it was like February. So I was gone I didn't see him for 3-4 months. And then he passed. I said, but you did that. You made those amends. So it's okay. You can rest easy with that. But now you have this responsibility. You don't have that father figure anymore. The buck stops with you in terms of that male role model in your life.
Right.
You're that male role model. So now you're up for it. He's a wonderful human being, a wonderful young man. And I knew that. I said, you're going to be fine. So but just know that. Whenever you want to talk about things relating to that, I'm here. I can't. I'm not your dad. I can never replace your dad. But I'm old enough. I'll be that guy.
You ever see there's a divine setup, if you will? Like, maybe God put you both at the same age, same time. Do you ever see how God might be working in that?
Maybe, I don't discount anything.
Right.
Anything's possible. I'm not. I've never been of the mind saying, "Oh yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah.
This was ordained," or this is that.
Right. Your brother, Ronald or Ronnie?
Both.
Yeah.
Some people call him Ronald. I call him Ronnie.
Right. How's he the role model in your life?
He's an incredible role model in my life. You know, I've heard that people in my profession, often people in my profession are second born, and the reason is, and then this will apply to anybody. It doesn't have to be, one particular family or group. It's because the firstborn, often in a family, that's the one everybody's taking pictures of. Everybody's like, "Oh, look at the kid. This is our kid. This is our kid, our son, our daughter."
Especially our generation.
Yeah, and then the second kid is like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, we know. We've been through all this. Yeah, oh, you got a cold. We know that. We know what that's like. You got, And so often they're the ones that are going, hey, hey, and that's why if you look in show business, there's a preponderance of people who are like second born and beyond because they were the ones that I need a little more attention. And another aspect of it, often firstborn is the one that's they're the mensch, they're the homebody, they're the strength, they're the one that stays by the family hearth. My brother still lives in Chicago. My brother's 83 years old.
Wow.
He hasn't left there. He's the glue. He's the one you can count on. He's that. And I was the one that, like, even as a teenager, I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go here. I'm here. I'm moving here. By the way, I'm this. And I get that. But my brother was so instrumental in my life in the sense that because my father was in ill health for much of his life, was disabled, and they retired him from he was an insurance man for a while, but then they retired him and he basically had to stay home and, because he could hardly breathe, you know. So it was my brother that was he's the one that taught me what books to read, what music to listen to. I remember him teaching me to tell time, even things like that. And also, I can never think of one instance where my brother ever yelled at me, hit me. God, the only time he ever got upset with me was when I was 15 years old, and when my dad was in the hospital for alcoholism. I decided to take the family car to drive to school at 15 because I'm thinking, well, the car's here. Might as well, come on, I'll just drive to school. And I remember I drove to school and I tapped another car. Luckily, nobody got no damage, but I had to call my brother because there was a little dent in the bumper. I said, look, this is what I did. And I remember all he did is he was so upset. He was at work. He hung up on me. That's all he did. But then he called later and says, okay, here's what we have to do. And I remember when my dad got out of the hospital and they cured him of his alcoholism. When he came home, he sees the bump, the dent in the bumper. He goes, what happened? And my brother took the rap. Said, oh yeah, I was warming up the car and I kind of bumped it. And I'm thinking, wow, what a mensch. My brother is a saint.
Wow.
And he still is. I mean, I feel very, very blessed to have had a brother like that. He's been the rock of the, and like when my mother lived to be 101, but when she in her early 90s, she needed assistance. I knew she couldn't just live alone anymore. So the thing was, we put her in a place right in Chicago, like 5 minutes from where my brother lives, and that was the deal. You're the guy that's going to be going there every day and taking care. I can't. I'm here. I'm in California. I'm doing a thing, but I'll supply what I needs to do to make this happen. You be that guy. And it's great. And it worked out just great. My mother died. She didn't die sick.
Gia, how has she affected your life in making you who you are today?
Well, Gia, I mean, the thing about Gia is she's been had to be put in that position of being the youngest daughter who has to be the older sister,
Right.
because of the nature of her sister's autism.
Mhm.
So that's a case where it's a child who is, I've always felt, is mature beyond her years because she had to be. And I remember of course there came that time when they were little and Gia was like maybe 4 and Mia was 6, and Mia was doing something that, because of her autism was unusual behavior or this, that, and you can see that Gia was like, I hate this. I wish Mia wasn't like this. And you just knew that day was going to come. And of course, you talk to them, they find, and of course, as they grow, she grows, she then starts to understand it.
Right.
And God bless her, she is that person now that she knows, she's well aware of the slot she has in life, that God willing, Mia is not going anywhere, and neither is Gia. And so, but at some point my wife and I are.
Right.
And there's a certain, and not that I want to saddle her with a responsibility, and she knows that, and I'm doing everything I can not to any more than needed. But yet, there is an inherent responsibility we all have, within families, within communities, within nations. And I think she understands that. So she is somebody who I think is mature beyond her years. She has her own set of issues. I mean, she has some medical issues that she has to deal with, and I applaud her because she understands it. She takes it with strength in the sense of, okay, this is what I have to do, and I have to deal with it, and I will. And so she does. That's all I can really expect. Um, so I mean, I feel the fact that she was even born was a blessing because we had some doubts, like we thought, do we even want to have a second child? Because what if this is a pattern? And then when I know about that, there are families that have every one of their kids that have autism
Mm.
or have a condition because of it. But there was nothing pointed that it was anything more than an anomaly that Mia had that. So it was like, no, it's okay to have a second child, and we did, and that was that.
Have you ever, like, witnessed, like, a miracle in your life or in somebody close to you, like, "Boy, that was just a miracle. I can't believe that happened."
I don't. Again, I would just go back to that. Like I said, I haven't never really been anyone to pray for anything because I always felt God's busy enough, and who am I to ask for anything? So I'll get through this. Things are pretty good. So all I can say is I'll never forget that moment I went into that chapel and said that because I really kind of felt that things were kind of everything was going south that day. And the fact that it worked out, I've never kind of, in a way, almost asked for more than that.
Mm.
Because I thought, like, okay, I used that shit up. You know what I mean? There's enough people with a lot of other more important things and deeper problems that need that kind of consideration. So I don't want to take that slot. So, I mean, I think we all see miracles every day. I mean, we just do. And you can just turn on the television, see something that happens, and say to yourself, "Oh wow, oh God, listen, that worked out great." So I don't like to personally try to evaluate it and say to myself, "Oh boy, this is a miracle that happened to me." This. I'll take that one that I thought was where I felt a, a, a wish was granted, a prayer was granted. At least until somebody can disprove that to me, I'm going to live with that, and that's the one I'm going to stand by.
How did Padre Pio become so special in your life?
Well, it kind of there's a young man, Luciano Lamonarca, who has this Padre Pio foundation, the association. He started this whole thing. He contacted me some years ago. And they basically said because I'm a Catholic and this that he wanted to meet with me and he wanted to present me with this almost just like being Italian and being successful in my profession and being a Catholic. I thought, well, thank you. Why not? And so I met with him and we went and it gave me, and I just I have it in my home. It's just a little kind of beautiful little art piece. But of course, it caused me to, and of course, I knew who Padre Pio was only just based on, well, you hear about it, you read a story here, this, that, and the other. But, it, and then when I realized he was from that same area of Italy, from where my mother's side of the family is from, you know, that made it even a little more, oh, okay. And then, and then I just felt that it's just another aspect of here's a human being that he lived, he existed. It's not something that so far afield that it's something from some thousands of years ago, and that you kind of have to believe because you have faith in it. No, this was a living human being who actually grew up in an area that perhaps my grandparents or great grandparents knew him, or saw him, and just the fact that what it was all about, and the whole thing of and again having gone to the school where I said Mother Cabrini, so here I was going to a school where the first, so I'm like, incorrect. It was the first American saint.
Yeah, first American citizen to be a saint. Yes,
I
correct.
guess it's his fate. And how I remember specifically going to school, and I mentioned to you earlier how I was a student there before she was canonized. So they had the statue of her in the church, but it was laying out, and they had it in like a glass box. And the reason they didn't want to put it up because she wasn't a saint, and they thought, well, you
Come on, get her
venerate.
up, get her up, get her
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. So it was almost like, so I didn't even know that that was the case, but I'm thinking, okay, you went in there and you prayed, but we thought this is kind of weird. Why is a statue in a box like laying on its back? Of course, then when she was canonized, they made a big deal of cracking the box open and putting it up. It was like, oh, now I get it. So all I'm saying is, so I just thought, like as often happens in life, something gets put in you know, your as I said, I don't make these plans, but if something's brought to you and you look at it and you see that there's beneficial aspects to it, there's some positive aspects to it, and it seems to be in line with kind of what you're about anyway, and who you are, and your nationality, your religion, your this, that, and they're doing positive things. Let's take that ride. Let's see where it goes, you know? And I don't wanna make it any more than that,
Mhm.
or any less than that. Because, I mean, because I'm not gonna be the one to say, "Oh my god, you this is," and I know there are people, not even friends, who will say, "Oh, no," like in case of Padre Pio, "Because of Padre Pio, my life was saved, I prayed to him, and this was that." I don't have those stories, but yet so there's a reason that this kind of happened. And so I'm like, you know what? This is all, as long as this stays positive, I'm in. I'm game. This is I can relate to this. This makes sense to me. This has there's a look to it. There's a everything from the nationality to all of it. That's like, okay, this is comfortable. So let's see where it goes.
I did a funeral for a woman who actually went to confession to him, which I thought it was kind of a weird hon it was kind of a cool honor. I always wondered what would it be like to have go to a confession, to go to a priest and have that person, what they call read your soul, like tell you, "Oh, you forgot to confess this and you forgot to confess that." You like and you think you have a great confession going on. The other part I think is funny with Padre Pio is that he'd sometimes the altar boys would act up. Today you can't do it, but like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See, Father Coco was like that. You
Yeah.
give me a little crack in the
Yeah.
head.
"What are you doing?"
Well, and do in this I carried, and I don't like I got this in France back in 2000. So before because I was doing a movie there, so and I saw it, and I thought I'm gonna wear it because it's it's because hi guys. Yeah, so this I've been carrying this for 23 years. This has been around my neck. There's certain episodes, certain shows I wore it, certain shows I didn't. And it was strangely enough on Joan of Arcadia, I purposely did not wear it because that character, he went through it. And it came out in the show that he was upset. He was mad at the church. He was mad at God, and we would have expounded upon that later. Yet as David Rossi in Criminal Minds, I do wear it because there is I'm beginning my Italian character. There's a Catholicism about him, but I also carry this. This is there's Padre Pio.
Oh,
And this is one of those things that, has whatever it may be, that,
yeah.
you know.
Wow.
So again, and I have at home, I have a little box with the little piece of the cloth of
Right.
and again, I know there are those people that know what all that stuff
Yeah.
is. I don't, but yet I can appreciate the fact that it was something that's given to me in good spirit
Right.
and saying this, and I think, why not? You know? So, and I think, and I look at him and I think, yeah, he looked like he could have been part of my family. He's like an
Yeah.
old Italian guy. And I think, okay, I'm not going to discount that because again, it takes me back to that time I walked in that chapel and prayed for my daughter's life. And I thought, okay, well, let me have a little remembrance that I carry every day in my pocket.
So one thing I want our listeners to understand that God doesn't give us just one favor. You have many more chits you can cash
Yeah,
in.
maybe. But
You're
again, like I said, if they come, they do, and if they don't, they don't,
right.
and I'm good with that, and I'm good with that.
I hear people talk to me all the time. Why God does things happen to me like this? This person's such a good person. Why are they suffering? And why aren't my prayers being answered? I go, it's above my pay grade. I don't know. My job is to help you get through it, to accompany you, but I can't answer God's will or his wisdom and why he allows things to happen. You know, why do our I mean, my father died when I was 11. Can't tell you why. I don't know. Would I be where I am today because of if he left? I don't know. So I I don't I've never blamed God for my life, the bad things that have happened to me.
No, I agree, totally agree with you there. I mean, it is again, like I said, again, I think that's a part of it. And it's also like it's not like every human being that has ever existed or will exist is going to take it is going to have a different kind of outcome.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Especially as you get older, and you start to realize that there's a time for living, there's a time for dying, and that's just it. So nobody gets that free ride
Yeah.
of like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to be here forever, and you're not. So it is an ongoing process, and so it's existed for this amount of time. It's going to exist for God knows how much time beyond this. And I look at the rest of the universe, and I think, yeah, there very will be duplications of what we're doing here
Right.
elsewhere with other people. I don't know. I'm not supposed to know right now. That's okay. I got enough to worry about right here.
Even on the show, you don't see the PTSD that must go on with these people who work in the BAU and the military. We don't even have
Of
words to
course,
describe that.
that's right.
I had the fortunate and unfortunate experience of talking to a World War II vet, and the reason why I say that is because I was the first person who's about to tell you what he said to me. I go, "Oh, he was in his 80s." This is about 20 years ago. I said, "Oh, what theater were you in?" He goes, "The Pacific or it was Europe." I go, "I was on D-Day." And he proceeded to tell me the 11 Germans he killed by hand.
Yeah.
And, and then he says to me, "Father, you're the first person I've told ever." I didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'm not surprised at all. Like I said, I've been involved with this will be my 23rd year coming up doing the National Memorial Day concert, So I'm around, a lot of military every year, especially at that time. Well, all four of my mother's brothers and my dad was hospitalized during the war. As I said, his brother, all five of them were World War II vets, combat vets, and never talked about it, never talked about it. It wasn't until later when I started doing that concert and taking a couple of some on occasion with me, they started opening up and tell these stories. And the reason I got turned on at a concert was the actor Charlie Durning, who a lot of people will remember from Tootsie. He played the father, played a lot of different. Well, Charlie Durning, a lot of people didn't realize he had a silver star. He was in D-Day. And when Charlie took his shirt off, he has a scar right in here. He's since passed away. He has a big scar in here. That's where a German bayonet went into his neck, the German that he killed with his bare hands.
wow.
So here's this guy that, there's a guy in Tootsie. That's that actor, Charlie, who's the da, 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 and you dig deep and you find out that's the story behind that guy. So yeah, you don't know who's.
Yeah, well, James Stewart was a pilot, I think it was, or
Oh, Jimmy Stewart was. Yes, he was. He was in the Air Corps. Yeah, that's
my,
right.
my
Clark
uncle.
Gable. A lot of actors were.
My uncle worked on Winds of War, and he was a costumer, John Napolitano, and he was a medic during World War II. And those guys brings you tears to your eyes.
Oh yeah.
The lack of freedom to talk about what you and I find easy to do now, they just didn't know how to express.
Ozzie Davis, who was who was the host of the Memorial Day concert before I took over when he passed away. He was a conscientious objector. Because of that, during that time, they made those guys medics. Because they're like, okay, you're not going to carry a gun, then you got to go in there and take care of the guys who did. And so in a way, he was in more combat situations than a lot of people,
Yeah.
and yet had no way to defend himself because that was just his thing.
I have a question for you. Um, when we meet Christ face to face, he's going to say something to us, whatever that might be. What do you want Jesus to say to you when you meet him face to face, whenever that happens?
I'm hoping he said, "You're in."
I got you. You're on the list, pal.
Yeah, you're in.
You're on the VIP.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would like to be able to say if I have that capability at those last moments, if I'm lucid on the deathbed, wherever that may be, and whenever that may be, that I could be able to say to myself, you know, at the end of the day, I'm content with what all that went down, and hopefully nobody has I'll put it this way. There was a quote that I read, and I think it was remember who Jack LaLanne was? He was
Yes.
the guy,
The
he's the
healthiest
muscle
90-year-old
guy.
you ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. And he used to roll on every year in his birthday, even in his 80s, he would roll at San Francisco Harbor across. He was that guy. But I remember I had his book, and there were different quotations in that book. And I remember one quotation that has stuck with me. It was that the sign of a life, and I'm paraphrasing it, but the sign of a life worth lived is that when it's over, even if by an infinitesimal amount, the world is a bit of a better place because you existed.
Mm.
And that's maybe because of the children you left who have done positive things, or you've done something positive, or at least you've done no worse. If you can at least say that, and hopefully, as to put it in the scenario you brought up, if indeed you pass and this figure of Jesus says to you, you know, if the first words and only words out of his mouth are, well done, that one infinitesimal thing, you did your contribution. It can be the most minute thing in the world, but as long as you did no harm and maybe did something to make it a little bit better. You made somebody, even if it was that one person, you might have been a jerk your whole life, but at the end you gave that sandwich to that person who was starving there, and everything else was pretty neutral up to that point. You at least, the world is that much better that you existed. And so if you did that, then I think then you deserve to go to heaven.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't mess it up. Don't mess it up for anybody else, because it's not you're not entitled to do that.
Well, when I look at your life as of now, you have at least 25 more years ago, according to Mama.
We'll see. Yeah.
Uh, I think you live that philosophy. And like, I want to make this place better than it was before. I do whatever I can, and this is my niche. This is who I affect, and hopefully, whether it's Criminal Minds or the veterans, I mean, whatever it is that you're trying to do that. So I can't think of a greater pleasure for me to converse with you. This has been an amazing experience for me.
It's been amazing for me, where we touched on things. We went to places I didn't think I was going to go or knew I was going to go.
Holy Spirit, there are questions that came to my head, like, ask this question. They weren't even part of my.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Joe, God bless you. Thank you very much for everything you've done, and I really appreciate your time. And I look forward to hopefully talking to you in the future. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.